A 7-year-old girl named Emma stood between a group of leather-clad bikers and a homeless veteran on a cold autumn afternoon, her small body trembling with fear but her voice unwavering as she begged them to leave him alone. She had no idea that these intimidating riders were members of Veterans Road Home, a charity organization that had spent months searching for this very man. She did not know that the weathered, silent, homeless man she had been sharing her lunch with for weeks was James Mitchell, her own grandfather, who had vanished 3 years ago after sacrificing everything to pay for his dying daughter's medical treatment. And she could not have imagined that her fierce, protective love for a stranger would become the bridge that brought a shattered family back together, proving that sometimes the smallest hearts carry the greatest courage. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. Emma Grace Mitchell lived with her mother, Sarah, in a small 2-bedroom apartment above Murphy's Laundromat on the corner of 5th and Maple Street, where the constant hum of washing machines and the sweet smell of detergent drifted up through the floorboards like a lullaby. Sarah worked double shifts at the diner 6 days a week, her feet aching and her smile tired but genuine, always making sure Emma had everything she needed, even when the bills piled up on the kitchen counter like autumn leaves. Their apartment was modest, furnished with mismatched pieces from thrift stores and yard sales, but Sarah had made it warm with colorful curtains she had sewn herself and Emma's drawings taped to every available wall. Every afternoon after school, Emma would walk 3 blocks to Riverside Park, her pink backpack bouncing against her small shoulders, her blonde pigtails swaying with each step. It was there, on a bench near the fountain that no longer worked, that she first noticed the homeless man. He sat on the same bench every day, his coat tattered and too thin for the cooling autumn air, his face weathered like old leather left too long in the sun. But there was something in his eyes that made Emma pause. Dignity. That was the word her teacher had used in class last week. And though Emma was only 7, she recognized it in the way the man sat with his back straight, the way he folded his hands carefully in his lap, and the way he never asked anyone for anything. She noticed him for 3 days before she did anything. On the 4th day, she walked up to him and held out half of her peanut butter and jelly sandwich, the one her mother had packed that morning with extra strawberry jam because Emma loved it. The man looked at her for a long moment, surprise flickering across his face, then slowly reached out and accepted it with a gentle nod. He never said much, just a quiet thank you that barely rose above a whisper, but Emma saw the way his eyes grew bright, the way his rough hands trembled slightly as he held the sandwich like it was something precious. After that day, it became their routine. Emma would arrive at the park, sit on the opposite end of the bench, and slide half her lunch across the weathered wood. Sometimes she would tell him about her day at school, about her spelling test or the picture she drew in art class, and he would listen with a small, sad smile. He never asked her name, and she never asked his. But over the weeks, something quiet and sacred grew between them. A bond built on shared silence and simple kindness, neither of them knowing they were connected by blood and loss and a love that had never really disappeared. On a Thursday afternoon in late October, Emma turned the corner into Riverside Park and stopped dead in her tracks, her heart leaping into her throat like a frightened bird. 5 massive motorcycles were parked near the broken fountain, their chrome gleaming in the pale sunlight, their engines still ticking as they cooled. Surrounding her friend's bench were 5 figures dressed entirely in black leather, their jackets adorned with patches and silver studs, their boots heavy and scarred. The roar of their motorcycles still echoed in Emma's ears, a sound like thunder that had sent pigeons scattering into the gray sky. The homeless man sat frozen on the bench, his weathered face pale, his hands gripping the edge of the wooden seat as the largest biker stepped toward him. Emma did not think. She ran. Her backpack slammed against her spine as her small legs carried her across the grass, her breath coming in sharp gasps, her mind filled with every warning her mother had ever given her about dangerous strangers. But these strangers were threatening her friend, the kind man who always smiled softly when she shared her lunch, who listened to her stories about school, who never hurt anyone. She skidded to a halt directly between the homeless man and the bikers, her arms spread wide, her chin lifted in defiance even as tears of fear gathered in her eyes. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking with emotion. "Please just leave him alone. He did not do anything wrong. Please." The bikers stepped back in surprise, exchanging startled glances, clearly not expecting a tiny 7-year-old girl to insert herself into their business. The homeless man reached forward with a trembling hand, his voice rough from disuse as he tried to tell Emma it was all right, that she should go home, but confusion clouded his eyes as he looked at the bikers with recognition and bewilderment warring on his face. The lead biker, a tall man with graying hair pulled back in a ponytail and kind eyes that seemed at odds with his intimidating appearance, slowly lowered himself to one knee so he was at Emma's eye level. His leather jacket creaked as he moved, and Emma could see a patch on his chest that read Marcus in white thread. "Hey there," he said gently, his voice surprisingly soft. "We are not here to hurt anyone." But Emma shook her head fiercely, her pigtails whipping back and forth, her small body planted firmly in front of the bench. "You stay away from him," she said, her voice stronger now despite her fear. "He is my friend and you cannot have him." Marcus kept his voice calm and steady, explaining that he and his friends were not there to cause any trouble, that they just wanted to talk to the man on the bench, that everything was going to be okay. But Emma did not trust them. She had seen movies where bad people wore leather jackets and rode loud motorcycles, and her mother had told her 100 times never to talk to strangers, especially ones who looked scary. "You look mean," Emma said, her voice wavering but determined. "Your bikes are too loud, and you are too big. And my mama says I should not talk to people I do not know." The other bikers, 3 men and 1 woman, slowly raised their hands and stepped back, creating more space, their faces softening with understanding. The woman, who had silver streaks in her long dark hair, gave Emma a small, reassuring smile. Marcus nodded slowly, respecting Emma's fear. "You are right to be careful," he said. "Your mama is smart to teach you that. My name is Marcus Kane, and these are my friends. We are part of a group called Veterans Road Home. We help soldiers who served our country, soldiers who sometimes need a little help getting back on their feet." Emma's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Why do you want him?" she demanded, gesturing back at the homeless man without taking her eyes off Marcus. The man on the bench, James, remained silent, his face a mask of confusion, and something else. Something that looked like fear or shame or both. Marcus reached slowly into his jacket pocket, making sure Emma could see his movements, and pulled out a worn photograph protected in a plastic sleeve. He held it out for Emma to see. "This is who we are looking for," he said quietly. "Do you recognize him?" Emma looked at the photograph. It showed a young man in military uniform, his face clean-shaven and proud, his shoulders squared, a slight smile on his lips. The photo was old, the colors faded, but the eyes were clear and bright. Emma looked back at the homeless man, at his gray beard and sunken cheeks and tired eyes. Then back at the photo. She shook her head slowly. "That is not him," she said. "That man looks different." But even as she spoke, something in her chest tightened, a strange feeling she could not name, as if her heart recognized something her mind could not yet understand. The man in that photograph had been James Mitchell, decorated veteran of the 101st Airborne Division, a man who had survived 2 tours overseas, only to be brought to his knees by an enemy he could not fight with courage or weapons. 10 years ago, James had been a proud father with a steady job at the Veterans Center, a small house with a white picket fence, and a daughter named Sarah, who was his entire world. Then came the diagnosis, the words that shattered everything like glass, a rare autoimmune disease that was slowly stealing Sarah's life. Her body attacking itself with merciless efficiency, James did not hesitate. He sold the house, cashed in his retirement, pawned his medals and commendations, even the Silver Star he had earned, saving 3 men under enemy fire. Every cent, every possession, everything he owned went toward an experimental treatment at a research hospital 3 states away, a treatment that cost more than most people would see in a lifetime. He worked 3 jobs, slept 4 hours a night, prayed to a God he was not sure listened anymore. The treatment bought Sarah time. Bought her 12 more years when doctors had given her 3, but it did not cure her, and it left James with nothing but debt that swallowed him like quicksand. The guilt consumed him like a slow fire. He had failed to save his daughter completely, failed to give her the normal life she deserved, failed to protect her from pain the way a father should. Sarah lived, yes, but she was weak, tired, her body forever changed by illness and treatment both. 3 years ago, when Emma was only 4 years old, James simply disappeared one winter morning, leaving behind a note that said only that they deserved better than a broken man who could give them nothing. He believed, with the certainty of the damned, that his family would be better off without him, without the burden of his failure and his shame. For 3 years he had lived on the streets, moving from shelter to park bench to underpass, watching the seasons change, believing he had done the right thing even as it killed him slowly. He never knew that Sarah told Emma he had gone to heaven, that he was a hero, because Sarah could not bear to tell her daughter that her grandfather had simply given up and walked away. Marcus looked from the photograph to the man on the bench, his expression filled with compassion and determination. "We have been searching for James Mitchell for 4 months," he said softly. "A fellow veteran from his unit spotted him near the river district and called us. We are here to help him, to get him into our program, to give him housing and support and a chance to rebuild his life." Emma's small face scrunched with confusion. "How do you know his name is James?" she asked, turning to look at the homeless man. "I never asked his name." It was true. In all their weeks of shared lunches and quiet companionship, they had existed in a space beyond names, beyond words. James finally spoke, his voice cracking like dry leaves, like something broken that had been silent too long. "I cannot accept help," he whispered, his weathered hands trembling in his lap. "I do not deserve it. I failed. I failed everyone who ever counted on me." Emma spun around, her eyes wide with distress. "Why?" she demanded. "You are nice. You always say thank you. You listen to my stories. Why do you not deserve help?" The older woman biker stepped forward, her silver-streaked hair catching the afternoon light, her movements gentle and deliberate. Her leather jacket bore a patch that read, "Rita," and beneath it, another patch showing a medical cross. Rita lowered herself to sit on the grass near Emma, making herself smaller, less threatening. "Sweetie," she said, her voice warm like honey. "Our organization helps veterans who served our country but fell on hard times. Sometimes good people, brave people, end up in bad situations through no fault of their own. Sometimes they lose their way because life gave them burdens too heavy to carry alone. We find them, and we remind them they are not alone, that their service mattered, that their lives matter. We give them housing, help them find jobs, connect them with counseling and medical care, help them rebuild what was lost." Rita looked up at James with eyes that understood pain. "Every single person in our group was once where you are now," she said quietly. "Lost, alone, convinced we were beyond saving. But we were wrong, and so are you." Rita's eyes held the weight of lived experience as she continued. "I was a nurse in the Army, served 8 years, saw things that still visit me in the dark hours of the night. When I came home, I could not hold a job, could not be around people, could not silence the screams in my head. I lost my apartment, lost my car, lost everything until I was sleeping under bridges and in abandoned buildings. Veterans Road Home found me 2 years ago and gave me my life back. They got me into housing, helped me get treatment for my PTSD, connected me with other veterans who understood, gave me job training, and helped me find work at the Veterans Hospital. Now I ride with them, finding others like I was, like you are. The program is real, it works, and it is waiting for you." James shook his head slowly, his eyes distant and defeated. "You do not understand," he said. "I am beyond help. I made my choices." I walked away. Emma's small hand suddenly gripped his worn coat, her knuckles white with determination. "Everyone deserves help," she said fiercely, repeating words her mother had told her once when they had given blankets to people at the shelter. "Everyone." Marcus stood, brushing dirt from his knee, and looked at James with an expression that shifted from gentle to serious. "There is something else," he said. "Your former battalion commander, Colonel Stevens, has been trying to locate you for over a year. One of your brothers, Sergeant Daniel Cooper, passed away 18 months ago. He left a considerable sum in his will to be divided among the surviving members of his unit. James, you are entitled to an inheritance. It is sitting in an account waiting for you. But we need to find you, verify your identity, get you the legal documentation to claim it." James stared at Marcus as if he had spoken in a foreign language, his mouth opening and closing without sound, disbelief and hope and fear warring across his weathered face. James shook his head violently, his voice rising with panic. "No! No! That is a mistake. Danny would not have left me anything. This is some kind of trick, or you have the wrong person. I am nobody. I am nothing. There is no money waiting for me, because I do not deserve anything from anyone." Emma looked up at him, her brow furrowed with curiosity despite the tension. "Are you a soldier?" she asked. "My grandpa was a soldier. My mama says he was very brave and that he went to heaven, but I do not remember him because I was too little." Marcus and Rita exchanged a sharp glance, something clicking into place, a puzzle piece sliding into position with terrible clarity. Marcus crouched down again, his voice careful, gentle. "Sweetheart, what is your full name?" "Emma Grace Mitchell," Emma answered proudly. "I am 7 3/4 years old." Marcus's face went very still. "And your mother?" he asked softly. "What is her name?" "Sarah," Emma said. "Sarah Mitchell. She works at the diner and she makes really good pancakes and she sings to me at bedtime even though she is always tired. She gets sick sometimes, but she is the best mama in the whole world." The color drained from James's face like water from a broken glass, his skin going gray beneath the weathered tan, his eyes widening with recognition and horror and dawning comprehension. His mouth worked silently, his breathing coming in short, sharp gasps. Emma looked up at him, frightened by the change in his expression. "Why are you crying?" she asked, reaching up to touch his arm. "Did I say something wrong?" Marcus turned to James, his own eyes glistening now. "Are you James Mitchell?" he asked quietly. "Veteran of the 101st Airborne Division, father of Sarah Mitchell?" James nodded, unable to speak, tears streaming down his weathered face and disappearing into his gray beard. His whole body shook as 3 years of grief and longing and unbearable loss crashed over him like a wave. The little girl who had been sharing her lunch with him, the sweet child who had protected him from these bikers just moments ago, was his granddaughter, his Emma, and the baby he had left behind when she was barely more than a toddler. Emma looked from Marcus to James and back again, confusion clouding her small face. "Are you taking my friend away?" she asked, her voice trembling. "He did not do anything bad." Marcus had to clear his throat twice before he could speak, his voice thick with emotion. "Emma, honey, tell me about your grandfather. What did your mama tell you about him?" Emma wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "Mama says he was a soldier and he was very brave and he loved us very much, but he had to go to heaven. She says he is watching over us and that he would be proud of me. I do not remember him because I was only 4 when he left. Sometimes I try really hard to remember, but I cannot. I wish I could remember." James made a sound like a wounded animal, his hand reaching toward Emma before stopping midair, trembling, as if he was afraid to touch her, afraid he would break something sacred. His tears fell freely now, splashing onto his worn jeans, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Emma saw him crying, and her own eyes filled with tears because she did not like when people were sad. She reached out and gently took his rough, calloused hand in both of her small ones. "It is okay," she whispered. "Please do not be sad." Rita knelt beside Emma on the cold ground, her own voice unsteady. "Sometimes people get lost." Not lost like on a map, but lost inside themselves. They think they are doing the right thing by staying away, but really they are just scared and sad and do not know how to find their way back. Emma considered this with the serious concentration only children possess. "But if you are lost," she said simply, People should help you find your way home. That is what you are supposed to do. James's whisper was barely audible. I do not have a home anymore. Emma squeezed his hand tighter, her young voice filled with absolute certainty. My mama always says home is not a place. Home is where people love you. Marcus stood slowly, his mind made up, his voice gentle but firm. We need to call your mother, Emma. She needs to know where you are, and she needs to know about this. Emma's eyes went wide with fear, and she shook her head quickly. Please do not tell her I was feeding him. Please. I will get in trouble. Mama says I am not supposed to talk to strangers, and I did, and she will be so mad at me. Rita reached out and touched Emma's shoulder softly. Sweetheart, you are not in trouble. What you did was incredibly kind. You saw someone who needed help and you helped them. That is not something to be ashamed of. That is something to be proud of. The other bikers nodded in agreement, their tough exteriors melting away to reveal the gentle souls beneath. Emma hesitated, then slowly unzipped her pink backpack and pulled out a laminated card that her mother had made her keep in the front pocket. It had her name and her mother's phone number, and the address of the diner where Sarah worked. Marcus took the card carefully, thanked Emma, and walked a few paces away to make the call. His phone pressed to his ear. While they waited, Rita went to one of the motorcycles and returned with bottles of water and granola bars from the saddlebags. She offered them to Emma and James, who both accepted with quiet gratitude. One of the other bikers, a stocky man with kind eyes named Tom, sat down on the grass near Emma. I used to drink too much, he said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. Lost my job, lost my apartment. Nearly lost my life. Veterans Road Home found me and got me into treatment. I have been sober for 3 years now, and I run my own motorcycle repair garage. Another biker, David, a thin man with gentle hands, added his story. I came home angry, could not control my temper, pushed everyone away until my wife took my kids and left, thought I had lost them forever. The program got me into therapy, taught me how to manage what was going on inside my head. 2 years later, my family gave me another chance. I see my kids every weekend now. They are teaching me to be the father I should have been all along. Sarah Mitchell was wiping down the counter at the diner when her phone rang, and she nearly dropped it when she saw an unknown number. Her mother's instinct immediately flaring with worry. Hello, she answered breathlessly. And when Marcus introduced himself and said he was calling about her daughter Emma, her heart stopped. Is she hurt? Sarah demanded, already untying her apron with shaking hands. Where is she? What happened? Marcus spoke quickly to calm her. Emma is safe. She is not hurt. She is here with us at Riverside Park. But there has been a situation, and you need to come right away. Sarah told her manager she had an emergency and was out the door before he could respond, running down the street toward the park. Her server shoes slapping against the pavement, her mind racing with terrible possibilities. Marcus had tried to tell her there was something else she needed to know, something important. But Sarah had already hung up, her only thought to get to her daughter. She reached the park in under 4 minutes, her lungs burning, and when she saw Emma surrounded by a group of leather-clad bikers near the broken fountain, pure terror gave her a final burst of speed. Mama! Emma called out, waving, her voice high and clear. Sarah ran to her, dropping to her knees and pulling Emma into her arms, checking her face, her arms, making sure she was truly okay, her hands trembling as they touched her daughter's hair and her cheeks. Are you all right? Sarah gasped. Did anyone hurt you? What happened? Emma shook her head. I am okay, Mama. These are nice people. They help soldiers. Sarah looked up at the bikers, ready to thank them or yell at them or both, and then her eyes fell on the man sitting on the bench behind them. The world seemed to tilt and slow, sound fading to a distant hum. She stared at the weathered face, the gray beard, the hollow cheeks, the familiar eyes that had haunted her dreams for 3 years. Her lips formed the word before her voice could catch up. Dad. Sarah froze, her body going rigid as stone, her face cycling through emotions so quickly it was like watching a storm move across the sky. Confusion first, her eyebrows drawing together as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. Then recognition. A spark of something igniting in her eyes as she looked past the beard and the weathered skin and the tattered clothes to see the man underneath. Disbelief followed, her head shaking slightly as if denying what her eyes were telling her. Finally, shock, her mouth falling open, her hands releasing Emma and flying to cover her lips. "Dad," she whispered again, the word breaking in the middle. James could not meet her eyes, could not bear to see the hurt and disappointment he knew would be there. He turned his face away, started to rise from the bench as if to flee, as if disappearing again was the only option he had left. Emma looked between them, her confusion deepening. "Mama!" "That is my friend. The nice man from the park. I share my lunch with him every day. He is very nice." Sarah's knees buckled and Marcus caught her elbow, steadying her, his strong hand the only thing keeping her upright. She stared at Emma, then at James, then back at Emma, and the realization crashed over her like a wave of ice water. Her daughter had been visiting her father for weeks, sharing meals with him, talking to him, forming a bond with him, and neither of them had known who the other was. The tragedy of it, the cruel poetry of it, was almost too much to bear. Sarah started to cry, tears streaming down her face as 3 years of grief and anger and desperate longing poured out of her. She took a shaky step toward James, then another, her hand reaching out. James finally looked at her, and his voice cracked like breaking glass. "I am sorry. I am so sorry, Sarah. I failed you. I could not save you. I had nothing left to give. I should have stayed away. I should not have let her see me like this." Sarah's voice rose, cracking with 3 years of suppressed anguish. "Where have you been?" she cried. "How could you leave us like that? How could you just disappear without a word, without letting me say goodbye, without giving me a chance to tell you it was okay?" James covered his face with his hands, his words muffled by sobs. The debt swallowed everything. "I gave you all I had and it was not enough. The treatment failed. I watched you suffer, and I could not save you. I sold everything, worked myself to nothing, and still you were sick. I was drowning, Sarah. I was broken. I thought you deserved better than a father who had nothing left, who had failed at the one thing that mattered. What kind of father cannot save his own daughter? What could I possibly give you when I had nothing?" Sarah shook her head fiercely, more tears streaming down her face. "You did save me," she said, her voice raw and fierce. "You gave me more time. You gave me 12 more years when they said I had 3. You gave me the chance to become a mother. You gave me Emma." Emma was crying now too, not fully understanding the words but feeling the enormous weight of the moment, the pain and love swirling around her like a storm. Sarah stepped closer to James, her voice softening but losing none of its intensity. "That treatment you called a failure gave me 12 more years of life, Dad. 12 years. I got to graduate high school. I got to fall in love. I got to hold my baby girl for the first time. I got to watch her grow. I got to live. Yes, I am still sick sometimes. Yes, my body is not perfect. But I am alive and I am grateful for every single day you gave me." James collapsed forward, his shoulders heaving with sobs that came from somewhere deep and ancient. "I wanted to come back," he gasped. "Every single day I wanted to come back, but I had nothing left to give you. No money, no home, no pride, nothing." Sarah knelt beside him on the cold ground, taking his weathered face in her hands and forcing him to look at her. "You gave me everything," she whispered. "You gave me my life." Emma wrapped her small arms around both of them, inserting herself into their embrace, her tears mixing with theirs. "Is he really my grandpa?" she asked through her sniffles, looking up at Sarah. Sarah nodded, crying and laughing at the same time. The sound caught somewhere between joy and grief. "Yes, baby. This is your grandpa. This is my dad." Emma turned to James, her eyes wide with wonder despite the tears. "I always wanted to meet you," she said softly. "Mama says you are brave. Mama says you are a hero." The bikers stood back, forming a protective circle around the reunited family but giving them space, and not a single eye among them was dry. Rita wiped her face with the back of her hand. Tom cleared his throat roughly. David turned away for a moment to compose himself. Marcus eventually approached gently, his voice soft but practical. "James," he said, "I know this is overwhelming, but the offer stands. Veterans Road Home wants to help you. The inheritance from Sergeant Cooper is real. $43,000 is waiting for you. He wanted to take care of his battle brothers, and you are one of them. We also have housing assistance available immediately. Medical care, counseling, job training if you want it. You do not have to do this alone anymore." Sarah looked at her father, her hand still holding his, her voice gentle. "Do you want their help? Dad, will you let them help you?" James looked at Emma, at her small face still streaked with tears, at the absolute trust and love in her eyes. He looked at Sarah, at the daughter he had tried to save and thought he had failed. The daughter who had somehow survived and thrived and become a mother herself. He looked at the bikers standing in their circle, these warriors who had found their way back and now spent their time finding others. Finally, after 3 years of believing he deserved nothing, James nodded. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, please. I want to come home." Rita stepped forward with a folder of paperwork and information sheets, her efficient nurse's instincts taking over. "We can get you into temporary housing tonight," she said to James. "There is a clean room waiting at the Veterans Transitional House on Oak Street. Tomorrow morning we will start the intake process for the full program, get you identification documents, apply for your benefits, start setting up appointments." Sarah shook her head before Rita could finish, her voice firm despite the tears still on her cheeks. "He can stay with us. Tonight. Please. We have an apartment. It is small, but it is home, and he should be with family." Emma nodded eagerly, bouncing on her toes. "Grandpa can have my room," she exclaimed. "I will sleep with Mama." "I do not mind. It will be like a sleepover." James looked between them, overwhelmed, his voice uncertain. "Are you sure? I do not want to be a burden. I have been on the streets for so long, I do not know if I remember how to be around people, how to live inside walls." Sarah reached out and took both his hands in hers, her grip strong and sure. "You are my father. You are her grandfather. We have lost 3 years already, and I will not lose one more night." The bikers exchanged nods and moved into action with practiced efficiency. Marcus and Tom walked with James to his spot under the Jefferson Street Bridge, 6 blocks away, where he had been sleeping for the past 2 months. They helped him gather his few belongings, a tattered military duffel bag that had seen better days, a worn sleeping bag, a few changes of clothes, a plastic bag with toiletries. Emma held her grandfather's hand, the entire walk back to the park, her small fingers laced through his calloused ones, chattering about her school and her teachers and her favorite books. The bikers escorted Sarah, Emma, and James to the apartment above Murphy's laundromat, their motorcycles rumbling through the quiet streets like protective thunder, and neighbors peered out windows at the unusual procession, this small family flanked by leather-clad guardians. At the modest apartment, Sarah helped James inside, her hand steady on his elbow as he climbed the narrow stairs, clearly unused to the simple act of entering a home. The apartment was small and filled with the hum of washers from below, but it was warm and bright with Emma's drawings covering the walls. Emma immediately took her grandfather on a tour, pulling him by the hand to show him everything that mattered in her 7-year-old world. "Look, this is my drawing of a butterfly, and this is my collection of rocks from the park, and these are my favorite books, and Mama reads to me every night before bed." James listened to every word, his eyes taking in the colorful chaos of childhood, the proof that life had continued and even flourished in his absence. Sarah moved to the tiny kitchen and began preparing dinner, pulling out pasta and sauce and vegetables, the first meal James would share with them in 3 years. While she cooked, Marcus sat at the small kitchen table, reviewing program details with her, his voice low and professional. "We will help him apply for the veterans' benefits he never claimed," Marcus explained. "Medical care for his physical issues, dental work, and counseling for PTSD. If he wants job training, we can arrange that. Or if he qualifies for disability benefits, we will help him apply. The inheritance will take a few weeks to process, because we need to get him proper identification first. A driver's license or state ID, social security card, birth certificate. It is a lot of bureaucracy, but we know the system, and we will walk him through every step. Sarah stirred the sauce, her vision blurring with fresh tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You gave me my father back. You brought him home." Marcus smiled gently. "Your daughter did that," he said. "Emma's kindness, her protection, her fierce little heart. That is what brought him back. We just helped connect the pieces." Over dinner at the small kitchen table, Emma chattered happily between bites of pasta, asking James 1,000 questions about being a soldier. Her curiosity boundless and unfiltered the way only children can be. James was rusty at conversation, his words coming slowly at first, stumbling over sentences he had not spoken in years. But Emma's enthusiasm was infectious, and he slowly opened up. He shared sanitized stories about his service, about the friends he had made, about seeing different countries and learning to fix helicopters and the pride he had felt wearing the uniform. "Were you scared?" Emma asked. Her fork paused mid-air, her eyes wide and serious. "Sometimes," James admitted, his voice soft. "But I had my brothers with me. We took care of each other. That is what soldiers do. We do not let each other face things alone." Sarah joined in then, sharing her own memories of her childhood with her father, and her voice grew warm with nostalgia as she talked about the camping trips to the lake and the bedtime stories he would make up with silly voices, teaching her to ride a bike in the park on summer evenings when the fireflies came out. James cried again, but these tears were different, gentler, and he said he remembered all of it. Every camping trip, every story, every scraped knee and triumphant moment when Sarah had finally ridden without training wheels. Emma's face lit up with sudden inspiration. "You can teach me to ride a bike," she declared, bouncing in her chair. "I do not know how yet. Mama tried to teach me, but I got scared. Will you teach me, Grandpa?" The word Grandpa fell from her lips so naturally, as if she had been saying it all her life. And James had to set down his fork because his hands were shaking. The simple promise of teaching his granddaughter to ride a bike. The prospect of a future together, of ordinary, beautiful moments yet to come, broke through the last of the walls he had built around his heart. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, I will teach you. I promise." That night, after Emma finally fell asleep in Sarah's bed, her small body curled around her favorite stuffed rabbit, James sat with Sarah in the small living room on the worn couch that Sarah had bought second-hand 5 years ago. They talked for hours, their voices low so as not to wake Emma. And the words flowed like water breaking through a dam. 3 years of silence finally ending. The hard years, the regrets, the pain. All of it came spilling out into the quiet darkness of the apartment. Sarah admitted through fresh tears that she had thought he abandoned them by choice, that he had decided they were not worth staying for, that the burden of a sick daughter and a granddaughter had been too much, and he had simply walked away to start over somewhere else. She had never known, could never have imagined, that he had sacrificed himself out of love. Not selfishness. That every day away from them had been torture. James shared his 3 years on the streets. The despair that followed him like a shadow. The isolation that became both punishment and refuge. He told her things he had never told anyone, how he would sometimes walk past their apartment building late at night, standing across the street in the darkness, watching the lit windows, catching glimpses of Sarah and Emma moving through their lives. He saw Emma growing up through those windows, saw her getting taller, saw the drawings she taped to the glass, never daring to approach, never believing he had the right to intrude on the life they had built without him. "She was visiting you every day," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "Leaving you half her lunch. You were both there. In the same park. And you found each other without even knowing." James broke down again, his weathered face crumpling. "She is so much like you were at that age," he whispered. "That fierce kindness, that stubborn compassion. When she stood between me and the bikers today, I saw you." Sarah reached over and took his hand. "She has your stubbornness," she said softly. "Your protective instinct. She is ours, Dad. She is the best of both of us." The next morning, the bikers returned before 8 o'clock, their motorcycles rumbling to a stop outside Murphy's laundromat. And they brought bags filled with donated clothes that would actually fit James, toiletries still in their packaging, a pair of sturdy work boots that looked barely worn. Rita had somehow found everything overnight, calling on the network of supporters who kept Veterans Road Home running. Marcus drove James to the Veterans Affairs office in his truck, and Sarah and Emma came along for support. Emma insisting on sitting in the back seat next to her grandfather, holding his hand the entire 20-minute drive. The process was long and tedious, filled with forms and questions and bureaucratic maze that would have defeated James on his own. But Marcus knew the system inside and out, knew which offices to visit and which forms to file, and which people to talk to. They filed for James's veterans benefits that he had never claimed, started the housing application, arranged medical appointments for the following week, scheduled an intake interview with a counselor who specialized in PTSD. The inheritance paperwork would take a few weeks to process, but Marcus showed James the official documents, the lawyer's letters, proof that it was real and legitimate, and waiting for him. James was overwhelmed by the kindness, by the efficiency, by the hope that was slowly replacing the despair he had carried for 3 years. At one point in the afternoon, while they waited for paperwork to be processed, Emma fell asleep in the hard plastic chair of the waiting room, her head resting on James's shoulder, her small hand still clutching his. Marcus looked over and smiled, his eyes crinkling with warmth. "That is why we do this," he said softly. "For moments like that, for families put back together, for futures that almost did not happen." 2 months later, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. James had a small one-bedroom apartment through the Veterans Housing Program, clean and simple with furniture donated by the organization, and pictures of Emma and Sarah already covering the refrigerator. Emma visited after school every single day, her pink backpack a familiar sight on his couch, and she often slept over on weekends, the two of them making pancakes on Saturday mornings and watching old movies in the evenings. James attended counseling twice a week, sitting in a quiet office with a therapist who understood trauma, slowly working through the guilt and shame and grief he had carried like stones in his pockets for so long. The inheritance came through in late December, $43,000, that felt like a fortune and a responsibility. And James used most of it to pay off the remaining medical debt that still haunted Sarah, the bills that had followed her like ghosts for years. He put the rest in a trust for Emma's education, ensuring she would have opportunities he had almost stolen from her by disappearing. He volunteered with Veterans Road Home now, riding with the bikers on their outreach missions, using his own story to reach men and women who had lost their way just as he had. There was power in telling another broken veteran that he understood, that he had been there, that there was a way back. Sarah's relationship with her father was healing slowly, carefully, like a bone knitting back together, and they were rebuilding trust, one conversation at a time, learning each other again. Emma thrived with her grandfather in her life, her joy infectious, her love uncomplicated and pure. She wrote a story at school for her English class, illustrating it with careful crayon drawings, and titled it, "How My Grandpa Found His Way Home." Her teacher gave her an A and hung it on the classroom wall for Parents' Night, and when James saw it, he cried again, but these were the good tears, the kind that meant healing.